上太阳红呀红彤彤哎，心中的太阳是毛泽东哎。
So, a thought kind of occurred to me while I was reading and responding to a comment from Comrade Kinetheus today. And the people that consistently shit on the DPRK for its flaws and for the strongman leadership under the Kims, yet these same people are completely ignorant to or just refuse to see the blatant hypocrisy that exists between that exists within the United States and its proxies. The DPRK deals with its traitors justly and accordingly, and has had a continuously stable government since its inception in 1945. Now, what does the US and the ROK have? A traitor who was elected president twice despite being a convicted felon, a con man, and a rapist. A traitor who tried to use martial law to install himself and his party as the sole leadership, like someone trying to force a sandpaper dildo up somebody's ass. Yeah, that's what you got? That's supposed to be the better alternative to, to communism, to a to the worker state? And I'm not going to sit here and praise North Korea as being, socialist, because it definitely it's definitely strayed from its revolutionary roots, and it needs to get back to it. And I believe wholeheartedly Kim Jong-un is trying to work to get it back to that. His dad took them down a path that they frankly shouldn't have had to have gone down, but ultimately that was kind of the result of the collapse of the Soviets. But that's a video for another time. I could go into a whole thing about that. No, I'd rather talk about the collapse of the US empire, actually, and how that's going to positively impact the North, because, karma's a bitch. Constant instability, either in the capitalist economy, which always seems doomed to repeat the same mistakes and collapse, or the slip into fascist dictatorship and dystopia. That's what the US and ROK have. Well, in the US's case, both. As the US empire continues to collapse, losing both its political and economic influence to China and Russia, I mean BRICS overall, but largely China and Russia, and very more specifically just to China, because the Russia's always going to play second fiddle, to somebody, whether it's them being second fiddle to the US, which, has largely made it clear that it's always going to be an adversary. Or, but so largely, China is going to end up being that next global hegemon. So because of that, the US has turned to the fascist alternative, which, in this case is the Republican Party under Donald Trump. And we're seeing the so-called left in America, which is a joke. The true leftists in this country are the communists, the demarchists, the anarchists, the actual Antifa people out there willing to commit actual violent acts be arrested, get, even to die, so that their black cadres, their native cadres, their trans cadres don't have to. Yet we're seeing these fucking liberals, which is what these pseudo leftists are. They're liberals. They're opportunists. People that engage in literal COINTELPRO action, that scream about how, we shouldn't trust the tankies because they just want to get everybody killed. That we shouldn't, trust the tankies because we shouldn't trust anybody that screams for a violent revolution. That's literally what a revolution is violent. The blue mega types. We're seeing those people turn fascist themselves, or literally just basically placate to them, proving that the liberal to fascist pipeline theory is just correct. These same people who call us tankies and use the debunked horseshoe theory, because the one that equates communists with Nazis, that one. Yet they are literally enabling Nazis or outright supporting social fascists, or trying to appeal to fascists and right-wing opportunists in order to win elections. Which, how'd that go for you? Oh, but I'm not a fascist. I believe in gay and trans rights. Yeah? Who did you vote for in the last... Did you vote in the last election? Who did you vote for? Well, I voted for Harris. So you voted for fascism. No. Donald Trump is the fascist. They're both fascists. No, they aren't. Oh, really? What did Kamala do to stop the genocide in Gaza? What did any of those spineless cocksuckers do or say they were going to do to protect Gaza? What did any of them say or do to protect trans kids, trans people in general? Not a goddamn thing. They could have codified protections for us. They could have stood, they could have stood up and did something, but no, instead they stood silent while red states stripped away the rights of my brothers, my sisters, my NB comrades, and banned drag shows. But let's be honest, we know what that really is. It's not drag shows they're banning. They're trying to exterminate trans people. And yet the Democrats stood by and let it happen. They always have and always will. And now they throw us under the fucking bus. How they don't believe that trans people should be engaging in athletic sports. They don't believe that trans youth should have health care or gender affirming care. The people that, are screaming that we're pandering too much to the far left, essentially regurgitating fascist talking points. They are just as guilty of being fascists as the right wing is. Oh, so you wanted Trump then? No. I want you lazy fucks to quit buying into this delusion that you can change the Democrats. that you somehow can infiltrate the system, that you can somehow revise the system, that you can, or what's that word? You can retrofit the system, retrofit the Democrats, and somehow change it. The system doesn't change. It's not designed to. Insert meme of George Carlin's, it's a big club and you ain't in it here, Alex. Damn it. So, yeah, the system changes you. And we've seen this time and time and time again. Remember when Bernie Sanders was leading the whole, our revolution and was supposed to sweep the Democratic nomination? Yeah, how'd that go for you? How'd that revolution go? Remember when AOC and the squad and those limp dick cowards at the DSA who were supposed to change the direction of the Democratic Party? Yeah, how's that going? But, I guess none of that matters because, I'm just tanky, right? What do I know about all this? I'm, me and my comrades are only right about things about 99% of the time. And trust me, I'm not here to get up on my soapbox and be proud of that. That's not something I'm proud to be, is right about a lot of this shit. In fact, to be quite honest, we honestly wish that we were wrong about more things. But we keep being proven correct. So, yeah. But none of that matters, because, socialism bad, communism bad. Wah, you're just an accelerationist red fash tanky. Yeah, okay, go jerk yourself off to your picture of Uncle Genocide Joe. It's the utter hypocrisy for me. It's the complete ignorance of these people who scream dictator about the strong guiding leader of one country, but yet, only recognize a dictatorship when it's your preferred party that loses an election because you were too much of a coward or in general just ran a shitty campaign with a shitty candidate.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Blow me. America has always been a dictatorship. It doesn't matter who the party in charge is. It doesn't matter who the fucking numbnuts that's, behind the podium. Some have been more benevolent than others. I'll give at least that much credit to them, but that's about it. Some have offered social concessions, but America has always had some form or another of reactionary leadership. FDR was a social fascist. He wasn't an anti-fascist. He was a social fascist, and I can prove that. He was basically a benevolent dictator who only saw a reason to fight against the Nazis because essentially the Nazis would have essentially caused a disruption in trade from Europe. That's the only fucking reason the U.S. got involved. Well, that and, Japan made the stupid mistake of battering the Pacific Fleet, to high hell, but yeah, if it wasn't honestly for Hitler being Hitler and the Japanese being stupid, the U.S. would have never entered the war. They would have sat by, just like they're doing now with the Navajo raids, with the indigenous, the indigenous Mexican and Mestizo community. Like, we're seeing the same shit. And they would have done the exact same thing to the Jews had it not been for the cock-ups of Japan. Because otherwise the only, and had Hitler not, essentially caused such a disturbance in Europe. But because, fascists have proven time and time again that they're idiotic and make stupid, incompetent decisions, it's what happens. And not only that, let's also just keep kind of remind everybody about how Coca-Cola literally violated those embargoes anyway. So yeah, ultimately capitalism doesn't even give a shit about that. They're still going to get their money either way. Like, they literally continued to trade with Nazi Germany. Had the Soviets had the capabilities to even steamroll Germany, trust me, they would have. Stalin would have. But the US and the West would have likely entered the war on the side of the Nazis then, because at the end of the day, again, it wasn't about stopping fascism, it was about protecting the global capitalist influence. Oh, and the Red Army was the ones who toppled the Germans and ended the war, by the way, so go fuck yourself.
Foot you. Simultaneous you and me, and you. Simultaneous loving, baby.
These people want to call Kim Jong-un a dictator. They want to call Mao and Stalin dictators, and they, of course, bring up that piece of garbage Black Book of Communism propaganda of how they killed, 100 million people, or is it 300 million people, or it's 600? I don't know, because the number seems to change all the time.
Damn!
Yet when your guy does the same thing, when they're like actively supporting genocides by a literal fascist regime, it's like, oh, or when, they enter into an illegal war, because they're searching for weapons of mass destruction, because those people somehow were the ones that flew the planes into the buildings, despite the fact that, those people were, it was funded by a Saudi guy, and I believe a couple of the guys were also Egyptian. Like, no, that, when your guy does it, that, when they go in and invade other countries and genocide their population, they're just protecting democracy, right? The same democracy that is literally right now consolidating power by removing and privatizing government agencies and services, just like the Nazis and the corporatists in Italy did. That democracy, the democracy in the ROK, who has had 2 dictators removed from power in the last 10 years, one, of course, being the daughter of a military dictator from the 70s, who is, thankfully capped, who also, like her father, was also under the influence of a cult leader. And then another dictator that was just removed because he tried to instigate one of the shittiest fucking coups that we've ever seen in order to install himself and his party as the sole legal rulers of the country. Yeah, that democracy. That's the one you're idolizing. Those 2 fucking shitholes. The U.S. empire is literally in free fall right now. Its economic and political power are free falling. I have not checked it as of this recording, but yesterday they were down significantly. The Dow Jones was down like significantly. the U.S.'s place as the global hegemon it's functionally over. And it's not even, and I can't honestly even say that Donald Trump has destroyed it. He's just honestly, if anything, he is honestly just, he has definitely accelerated the process. He definitely hasn't made it any better. But it's the fault. It's the fault of Joe Biden. It's the fault of Trump, in his first term. It's the fault of Barack Obama. It's the fault of literally every fucking neoliberal economic policy that has existed since pretty much since frankly, since Reagan. I would even argue even further than that. I'd go back to even Nixon. It's functionally over. And it's senile geriatrics who, masquerade as so-called leaders are only ensuring its inevitable collapse. The U.S. is more divided now than it ever has been. At least at best, it is the most divided it's been since the Civil War. But I'd argue it's worse than that. Analysts have labeled it as a flawed democracy for the last several years. And foreign governments, once great allies, are now issuing travel advisories because of the civil and human rights abuses that are going on in the country. And they no longer can count on the U.S. to be party, to their interests. So it's forcing them to go elsewhere, and they are going to go elsewhere. They're going to continue to butt heads with Russia, but Europe's going to be significantly weaker because of that, because they won't have the U.S. to rely on. And economically, they're probably going to try to make buddy a little bit more with China, because they see the writing on the wall. They see that the economic shift is swinging back towards China. They don't want to admit it. They actually really don't like it. But, well, suck it. They're going to have to, because China is going to basically be the place where the main source of trade in the world. It already is. It has been for a long time. It's just now we're seeing the effects of that. The U.S. is the sick man of the world. It's a dying geriatric on life support. And it's time to pull the fucking plug. South Korea is in the worst shape since the return to, democratic rule in the late 80s, early 90s. And while the DPRK economy and its food security hasn't always been the best, they're actually making great strides in recovery right now, and it's thanks to Kim Jong-un and his policies, and the policies of the Workers' Party of Korea. Living standards are improving. Construction projects are moving forward. New schools are being built. Not, the living standards that I mentioned that are improving, doesn't really matter. All of that, really, is not just in Pyongyang. It's also making its way to the rural areas as well. We're seeing renewed investment from China and Russia, and even a surge in tourism that's finally coming back post-COVID, because they finally reopened the borders again. And as its enemies crumble around them, the arduous march that has, I would arguably say, been going on since the mid-90s, because I don't think it ever really ended. And again, a lot of that has to do with sanctions and U.S. bullying and Western bullying and all that crap. But that arduous march might finally be coming to its eventful and much needed end. Kim Jong-un has been slowly opening the country back up to civilian worker-controlled government, as the country can now begin to shift a lot of its focus away from military and defense, as it now possesses far better capabilities to protect itself than it ever did. The U.S. doesn't want to admit it, but its infrastructure, specifically its military infrastructure in this regard, is not as great as it says it is. And the idea of North Korea having nuclear deterrent scares the shit out of them, because they know if they try to do anything, North Korea could obliterate them, or at least obliterate, the Western U.S. China, of course, would likely back them, and so would Russia. So, yeah, sometimes it's good to have some friends in high places, even if they don't share your common interests. But the point that I'm trying to make here is they're in a far better position than they were when the Soviet Union fell. While the DPRK certainly has its problems and its flaws, and these are definitely criticisms that we should all justly make, despite all that, it lies on the precipice of returning to the glory days of Kim Il-sung, before Songdong, before the arduous march. And this is the belief and the faith that the people of the DPRK have long had about Kim Jong-un, that he would return the DPRK to its glory days that his grandfather once led them through. The days when North Korea was quite factually the best Korea, at least in terms of economy. And technically, well, no, just in general, because it also has maintained the strongest stability throughout the years. That being said, it should be made abundantly obvious that North Korea has always been the best Korea in terms of stability. If it weren't for the U.S. bankrolling the ROK for decades, it would have been over a long time ago. If it hadn't been for the U.S. providing aid and having this anti-communist crusade for the last, 80 years, the ROK wouldn't even exist. It would be a united Korea under the people's government. If it wasn't, if it wasn't for the U.S., South Korea wouldn't functionally exist. And even if it had militarily backed it up, the ROK would have essentially, it would have gone bankrupt decades ago. And the people would have been clamoring to be reunited under the vanguard leadership. It's almost as if maybe communism isn't the evil authoritarian dystopia that the liberals and the fascists make it out to be. It's almost as if the real dystopia is the first world capitalist countries. I'm RedPagan Nicole for the RedPagan Network, signing off. Until next time, Red Salute. Thank you for watching. If you like news and politics from a leftist perspective, true crime, or informational videos on leftist philosophy and pagan belief practices, and would like to support the channel, please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. Even a few bucks really helps me out. All links are provided in the description. Like, comment, and subscribe, and share on various social media. Hit the notification bell so that you never miss a video. I put out content regularly, so you will always get quite a bang for your buck.